Welcome to the Maintenance Mavericks podcast, where we talk about trends in maintenance, reliability, and asset operations. Today, I'm super excited to be here live here at the Reliable Plant Conference in Orlando, Florida. Just a little bit of context for those of us joining us live. My name is Ryan. I'm the CEO and founder of Upkeep, and today's guest, we've got very own Bennett Fitch. He is the Chief Strategy Officer at Noria Corporation, where he develops and implements new strategies, supports end users with training, professional connections, and also provides services to businesses to help improve their plant reliability. Welcome, Bennett, to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much, Ryan, for having me on. This is an exciting event for us. A little bit different, of course, than you're probably used to, and glad to be in person, being live, and the fact that this is at a Reliable Plant Conference is special to us.
I can feel the energy, right?
Yeah. Well, this is a whole week endeavor here. People experiencing all different things and figuring out what they're trying to figure out what their goals are and ask all the questions to get to those answers. And it takes time.
Yeah.
But it's a pleasure to be here with you and going through this podcast for you.
All right. Well, for those of us joining us live that don't know the typical format of our Maintenance Mavericks podcast, what we always kick things off with is just have you, Bennett, share a little bit more about your background, your story, how you got your feet into this industry of maintenance reliability, lubrication, oil analysis.
Well, it's a little bit of a family story. I don't know how far back do I want to go. But the truth is, if I even consider my mentors in my life, and the big ones have been my father, my grandfather. It goes back to the 50s and 60s when my grandfather started one of the first fluid power research centers. He was a professor at Oklahoma State, and had several doctors that came after him and worked with him to develop new standards in the industry in fluid power, and that kind of trailed on to some endeavors that my dad got involved into with inventions in contamination control in the 80s, and in the mid-90s, later 90s, that's when Noria was started, and I was there watching the beginnings of Noria, seeing how this was a little bit different than other companies or other things I saw people were getting involved with. So I definitely really wasn't too involved there at the very beginning. But about 20 years ago, I had my first opportunities to do some research and write articles. I remember I was super obsessed with magnets at the time. I love the concept of magnets, so I was researching about how magnets were used in filtration to help remove contaminants in machines, which is a big part. And controlling contamination in the life of the machines. And lubrication is a focus with Noria. So I got into this industry by learning from them as my mentors, but and since then, I've definitely learned a few things. I worked at different oil analysis laboratories. I spent some time with Navistar, who, they're a parent company of International Truck, and worked with some formulas to update their oil change intervals and different things like that. But really, over the last 10 years, that's where I've been with Noria, trying to find ways to improve the industry with oil analysis. And I love it. I think there's a huge unmet opportunity in this field.
Yeah. So you kind of it sounds like grew up in the entire industry, family-owned business, and stayed in it for, it sounds like, what?
Yeah, a long time. I was injected with oil from the very beginning. Remember hearing these words before I even knew what they meant. So.
All right. So, what keeps you passionate about the oil and lubrication industry? Why have you stayed in it?
Yeah.
Obviously a lot of, I can speak from a little bit of personal experience here. It's not the sexiest industry.
That's right.
And kind of growing up and seeing all this, cool tech. What kept you in this industry?
The fact that it wasn't sexy is why I got into it.
Okay.
No, think about it though, because I have a mechanical engineering background. I went to school for that, and I knew about lubrication a little bit going into school, so I was paying attention to when it was mentioned, and frustratingly enough, I was not finding any mentions of it until several years in, and it was amazing to me how a field like mechanical engineering and the world where everything that has to move requires a lubricant, yet we're not focusing on it very much. Why? Because it's not very sexy.
Yeah.
But that means that there's an opportunity, because the lubricant in a machine, oil or grease, it's the blood of that machine. Just like the blood in our body, the machines can't operate very long if they don't have the lubricant aspects done correctly. And there's so much opportunity as well with oil analysis, which is simply analyzing what's in the lubricant the same way we might analyze our own blood, a doctor might, and tell you things about your body that you have no awareness of. You feel fine, you look fine, but yet they tell you a different picture about something specific in your body. And I think it makes us feel like we're doctors to our machines. Yeah. And it's a lot cooler, once you really get into it and see the science behind it. But I guarantee you, no one's coming out of high school thinking I'm going to jump into lubrication or oil analysis. And I think it's because of that there's an opportunity to really advance that field and make people realize how important that really is.
Yeah. If I sum that all up, it's the opportunity to change, the opportunity to improve that's kept you here for so long. So I want to ask you, Bennett, what is one thing that companies are not doing enough of when it comes to let's call it oil analysis lubrication?
Sure. Well, I think my heartbeat lately and things I've been maybe having opportunities to speak on when I have a chance, I was at a ASTM symposium a month ago, and this was a condition monitoring symposium focusing all the different condition monitoring technologies, like oil analysis included, but vibration and acoustics and thermography. And my goal that week was to talk about human-based inspections. Okay. Now, it seems like you're going to the archaic ages of the way things were done. Why would we be focusing on that? But the truth is, we are still humans who have an immense ability with our own senses to see things and process what we're finding, what we're seeing with a supercomputer in our head and create decisions very, very quickly. And we've kind of gone away from that because we see technology growing around us, and there's a lot there that is still happening and is hugely valuable, but we forget how much we have our own capabilities. And so, what I've been kind of harping on lately is the value of human-based inspections, collaborating that with the other technologies to be able to really understand the conditions of your machine and create quicker action, because there's a daily activity that can be had. That's one. I think there's a lot to learn with lubrication. Anyone listening who doesn't really understand maybe lubrication oil analysis that well. The truth is, you look at a lot of process facilities, any machine that's operating, even the own oil in your car, it requires the oil for it to operate. But the most common reason why machines do fail, and this is very well documented, is because of the frictional surfaces occurring and the lack of lubrication or improper activities related to lubrication, maybe contamination related, that impacted that and caused the life of that machine to drastically change from what could have been infinite in some cases down to just mere years or months.
So you're talking human-based inspections. I mean, there's a lot of things go through my mind when you say that. One is is it because the standard right now is nothing, and human-based inspections is a good stepping stone to getting to condition-based monitoring, or is it truly that condition-based monitoring, only captures a small fraction of what a human eye and ear and smell and can actually decipher?
Well, I think the issue is that we see it every day. We have our senses. We know how valuable those are. But the entire time we're doing that, it's all subjective. We're taking our observations, and my observation is different than your observation and everyone else's. So if we try to require some way of gathering that information and putting use out of it, we're going to get very different perspectives and very different results. And that's probably where people try to stay away from it, because unlike vibration data, ultrasound data, there's ways to structure that where it's hard data. It's more objective, and you can put structures behind all that are more reliable, on top of the fact that it's not human, so you have something else to blame if something goes wrong. People don't want to be in the blame if you interpreted something wrong. So it's a little bit of a scarier aspect, but we can work with that. We need to not just stay away from the ability to interpret something about a machine just because we're worried our opinion's wrong, or there's a way we might be blamed at the end of the day. You can't just rely on the hard data. You have to have an ability to influence the decisions with your own observations and your own opinions.
It's actually a very interesting opinion because we got all this tech. We're here at the Reliable Plant Conference where, we see all this tech being introduced to us. And what I hear from you too is like, it's also important to have that human mindset, to have the, human brain to be able to help decipher and pull out things that, technology and these hard data pieces aren't able to pull out. What are you excited about in terms of the future of lubrication and oil? What technologies, what trends are you seeing that get you really excited?
I think, you talked earlier today about reliability culture. You're in a panel. It's a great discussion. And the truth is, sometimes it's a challenge to get different departments at a facility to work together. We have those conversations about operations, working together with maintenance, working together with the reliability team, and where does inspections and where does lubrication fit with all that? Well, oftentimes that is the point of contention. When reliability engineers find out the problem is lubrication related, and they want to go to maintenance and say, hey, why aren't we fixing that? Well, it could have been fixed because the operations weren't part of the daily inspection because they're there every day. Yeah. But if you focus on the things that are the scariest first, like lubrication, because it does seem scary at first when you don't have a good familiarity with it. It's not the sexy thing that you learned growing up and were aware of. If you target those things and try to get that right, this is what we see in facilities on a daily basis as we work with at Noria, it starts to bring people together because we're seeing successes come out of nowhere. So I think there's going to, there's already trends of people targeting those initiatives and working with different software and different physical products out there that are essentially geared at helping people solve the lubrication problems they're having and getting those departments to work together, understanding that operations must be part of the daily inspections. They must communicate certain things that they see, and they can't be siloed out. It has to be a way for this communication to grow.
Yeah, I mean, what we always say internally here at Upkeep is that your operators are the best eyes and ears on the ground of what actually is happening, and they probably know better than anyone or anything else about when a piece of equipment is going to fail. We talked about like empowerment earlier today. We talked about like ownership earlier today. And we kind of think like empowering the operator to say and raise their hands when something might go wrong is going to be one of the most like game-changing parts of a business and their reliability program.
I think so too. We need to realize that they have an ownership to what's going on. They need to develop that mentality a bit more and have a way to work together in these different departments to see where they fit. And it's not just, you do this, I do that. I think that's changing drastically, at least what I've seen the last 10, 15 years, that people are forced to work together and they're having more success with that result.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Again, we talk about this very often, bridging the gap between maintenance reliability and operations. We're all working together to achieve the same goal, but right now we're also working in these separate silos.
And one thing I like with inspections I mentioned earlier, one thing I like to do is have group inspections, which sounds interesting or odd at first, but all that is that bringing people from all different departments, like those three that you mentioned, and let's spend an hour, 2 hours, however long we can allow for that time to spend, walking around the plant and seeing what we each observe. What does the operator see when he walks up to a machine? What does the maintenance tech see? What does the reliability engineer see? And have those conversations happen. Usually doesn't happen because it's so loud and hot or something else that they kind of want to get out of it.
And everyone's got their own priorities, doing their own thing.
But if you carve out that period of time for those...
You learn from each other.
And you realize that you're really trying to achieve the same thing. You're not...
I love that. Yeah, I mean, that's such a good perspective to have. At least in the technology world, they have... it's called pair programming.
Okay.
It's a little bit a different concept, but similar mindset. It's like you take two engineers, you have them sit together and work on the same problem together, and what you find is that not only do they solve the problem together, but they solve it in a better way. I mean, they learn from each other.
Yeah, we have to be able to collaborate. I was mentioning this morning during opening remarks and how it's important to allow each of our own experiences, history of what we've read, what we've learned, who who we've talked to and observations we've made every day. We each have our own encyclopedia of experiences, and when we work together, it's amazing what the result can be.
Been in this industry for quite some time. I'm sure you've seen a lot of good, a lot of bad, everything in between. What are some of the best results that you've seen companies get from a great oil analysis lubrication program, and what do most people get wrong?
Well, let's think about this. So results are always coming down to money, right? You know, we have to track things with KPIs, and that's where I'm going to answer my second question about KPIs.
Okay.
But so your first question was about, what have I seen as a success? Is when people start chipping away at the wins and identifying, how important that one success was, but also the failures. Letting people know how important it is when we do things wrong, what happened there? What's the result of that? And it comes down to, why are we doing things this way? So I've seen success when changes are made by the influence a team has at communicating the differences that are happening when lubrication is done right, working together, not just being complacent about what you're doing, but actually taking things forward, coming to events like this and presenting the findings, putting it together. But the thing that people probably are not doing quite right, or something that they forget to do and is incredibly important, and is where I think it's more important to talk about this, is making sure you measure information from the very beginning. Mm-hmm. If you don't measure from the beginning and you start having success and then you start measuring, then people forget how hard things actually were, how difficult. Let's talk about even mean time between failure. And that's a typical measurement of how often things fail. But if we don't track that earlier on, and then we start making all these great initiatives and making things better, and then track it, we'll realize, wait a minute, things were a lot worse before, but now you can have new staff come in, new employees, time goes on, years go on, but the people that come in and try to continue those activities are not going to realize if we don't do those certain things a certain way, we're going to go back to the way things were. Mm-hmm. So we must have these KPIs that show the key performance metrics of how things have grown, because otherwise we're going to go back to the way things were. A common example for us is filtration, or a desiccant breather, which is a device that you put on top of a machine that helps make sure the air going in and out, particularly the air going in, is clean and dry air. Otherwise, that will influence the life of the machine. Well, if that was an initiative that was put into place, then months and years from then, the machine is more healthy, has less failures, assuming everything else is fine. You have a new employee comes in, they don't know why that breather's there, why it's important. So the breather goes bad, they don't worry about replacing it or something like that, or they put something cheaper in there. They think it's not important because they weren't there when life was had prior to the time those practices were put into place. But if you have the metrics that show the value of these initiatives put into place as you grow a program, whether it's lubrication or vibration or implementing a software and showing where the values are, then you are guaranteed to struggle in the long-term growth. It's only going to be a short-term win.
Yeah. And it goes back to that very old saying that's, you can't improve what you don't measure.
Exactly. And
having the right kind of baseline helps show progress. And that progress, again, we talked about this earlier, that progress drives a lot of change and momentum for people. And it drives this sense of ownership because now you can actually measure what you're hoping to improve.
Mm-hmm. So much opportunity there.
So I read one of your articles about risk management for lubricated machines. In that article, you said identifying what can be controlled and should be controlled may be crucially valuable in improving the reliability of machines and overall well-being. You said managing this risk by taking key proactive and preventative actions to minimize or eliminate these risks is our call to action. So you put out a big call to action for people, and I think it's all very important, extending beyond just lubrication. Want to ask you, Bennett, where do you see most companies on a scale of 1 to 10 along their journey of identifying what can and should be controlled for overall machine health? It's a long question.
Yeah, it is a little bit. I'm trying to remember what you just said. I said one time before.
let me.
No, it's okay. I like it. I like it. So.
I can simplify it too.
Sure. I think people, 1 to 10 maybe have an effort that's high somewhere. I'm getting an 8 or something.
Effort.
High
Okay,
effort.
okay.
But the truth is they don't know what they might not be doing right. Yeah. So the right things are much lower, and like a 3 or a 4 because they're maybe not looking at the data the right way. But I think in the quote that you mentioned, it's important to tackle the things that are able to be addressed. Mm-hmm. We need to know what that addressable zone is. We have a chart that we use in our training that emphasizes all the reasons why machines could fail. Yeah. And there's going to be some reasons why machines fail that you really can't do anything about. But there's a substantial amount that is, and it relates to something called the Pareto principle. Mm-hmm. You've probably heard of the Pareto principle. Let's focus on the critical few aspects that had the largest impact. Yeah. For us, it could be what are the critical few machines that has that most common downtime, 20%, 80%, or the 20% of the reasons why machines fail that cause 80% are responsible for the 80% of the occurrences of failure. Well, that 20% includes things like lubrication deficiencies, not using the right lubricant or defective lubricant. There's a few others like contamination as well. Those are addressable because we can make changes to how we're controlling the lubrication aspects. But that requires us to think outside the box a little bit beyond what just is by default on our machines. Machines by themselves, are made to perform a function, but they're not usually sold with all the right adjustments and apparatuses like the right sight glass, the right breather, the right filtration system to make sure it has the longevity you need. It usually has just the build just to get through the warranty period or something like that. So if you need to be able to extend the machines out further, you need to be ready to make changes and realize it's not just what the manual says initially that is like the gospel here, but learn about new practices as well. And like come back to the inspections as well, about the, using your opinions as part of your decision-making process. It's not just about the data you see because the data, some of the toughest decisions don't have enough data. Yeah. And so we need to be ready to make decisions, have a little guts at times to try new things, experiment a little bit. It reminds me of a quote, I think, or a principle that Colin Powell used to follow that relates to making decisions. And it's called the 40-70 rule. And it basically goes down, if you have at least 40% of the information and up to about 70% of information, between 40 and 70, so too little, you have not enough information, too much, you've waited too long. That 40 to 70% of information is where you should be making your decisions. Because if you go beyond 70%, you're probably too late. Yeah. You've lost the opportunity. But you have to realize there's a moment there where you have to have your intuition to make those changes happen and take it from there. So partially answering your question, but I went a different direction. But.
Yeah, I mean, what I hear from that, it all comes down to control what we can control. Don't try to control the uncontrollables. And you mentioned this 80-20 rule, which is 80% of your problems come from, or 80% of issues come from 20% of problems. Yeah,
that 20% of the possible reasons why machines fail,
And so ultimately, it's about taking our time and focus on, again, just controlling what we can, that is actually within our control. Yeah. And not worrying about the 80% of things.
It's almost like a life mission too, in life. Not worry about all those things that you can't control, right? Tell my wife that all the time.
So, I think what we are talking about is, again, focusing on making tough decisions, choosing between two really good options. And obviously your role here is as the Chief Strategy Officer here at Noria. And I kind of want to ask you, a little bit more about making tough decisions in business. What are some ways that you've empowered your team to be bold, take action, not be afraid of taking risk? I feel like oftentimes we just get stuck in this place of analysis paralysis.
Yeah. Well, it comes down to even what I just said there about that time period and when you try to make decisions, and let people know you don't have to wait till you have the 100% perfect data to make a good decision. And believe in their opinions. Let them take risks and realize when things go wrong, it's okay, because it's more important to make the wrong decision and make no decision at all.
Yeah.
Because you wait too long, you never had a chance. Like when you're playing golf, you have to hit the ball far enough to even get a chance to get to the hole. You might miss it, you might go beyond it, but at least you had a chance of getting to the hole. So you have to work at it and give them enough of a stage and an opportunity to work off their opinions and talk through it, explain to them, what's the result here, why are we making these decisions, but make sure that when they get it wrong, that you make sure that that's okay. It's not something, you messed up, you're never going to listen to you again. And we want to appreciate the fact that you at least are working towards making things better so that they have an opportunity to go back at it, try again, don't quit, and keep going.
Sure.
So.
All right. Thank you so much, Bennett, for sharing all of your insights there. The way that we always wrap up our Maintenance Mavericks podcast is by doing a set of quick fire questions where we kind of leave our audience with a few nuggets of additional information. So it's basically, I'll ask you a question, you got 20 seconds or less to respond. You ready?
Let's do this.
All right.
20 seconds.
All right. One trend in maintenance reliability operations and lubrication that you're excited most about.
Oh gosh, that's a tough one.
Time's ticking.
I
Come
know.
on. I'm just kidding.
Well, of course, there's a lot of cool technology like IoT and all that's coming around. But I think it has to, be the products that allow us as human beings being able to utilize our own daily activities and not just rely on data. So any technologies out there that I'm seeing quite a few, including a little bit what Upkeep's doing, is allowing people to leverage their strengths but use that technology to come together, but keep it simple. I think the simple technologies are always the best. So you'll see a few out there. I'm sorry, I keep referring to our own event because, of course, we're at Reliable Plant, so move on.
All right. Yeah. Most important lesson that you've learned throughout your career?
Most important lesson? Don't rest on your laurels. Make sure that whenever things go well, you get success, that's not a point in which you rest. You have to make sure, because as soon as you rest, that's when everyone goes around you and keeps on going.
Yeah.
So keep on moving, making sure that you evolve in the right way.
We talked about that earlier today. Yeah. The only thing constant is change.
Yeah.
And if you don't change with the ever-evolving world, then the world's just going to keep on moving without you.
I agree.
All right. Biggest challenge you're facing in your current role right now, and how are you tackling that?
Feedback.
Okay.
Having good feedback. I think it's been sometimes tough, depending on how you build a product, to make sure you have an idea of what's working, what's not. If you don't get good feedback at all, you make assumptions. And so you need to have a good, I'm working on that right now to make sure that there's a mechanism to when we're providing a service or a product, that we have a way to really understanding how they received it. Not just the fluffy stuff, not just, it was great. I want to really understand what's working, what's not. So feedback.
I appreciate the honesty in that response too, Bennett. And what's the biggest takeaway that you hope all of our listeners are gonna walk away from today's discussion with?
Well, I think you and I are in a similar generation, and we are around several people that have been doing these things for decades, and you can't ignore that. They have tons of experience. They understand all the legacy activities of how to maintain machines, run programs, and but that's evolving. We're going away from it, but we're not disregarding it. So we need to find a way of bridging the current generation and the future generations, but with things that have worked and been successful, but building a proper mindset of problem solving and troubleshooting and working through it, even though we are integrating new things that they may not quite understand. And I think another thing, is understanding that sometimes there's a lot of people giving advice. And it seems all like good advice, but be careful, watch out. Sometimes there's some bad advice too, so just watch out and think about the problem, go through an analysis of what the right questions are to ask, continue to ask questions before you really start diving into what solution you want to really work with and make that your goal.
Well, totally agree with that one. There's a lot of advice out there, even in this conference here.
Yeah.
I would say none of it is necessarily bad, but taken in the wrong context.
That's true. I like that, yeah.
It could be the wrong thing for your team, your business, or you personally?
Yeah, just because it sounds cool and seeing success with someone else, it doesn't mean it has to be your initiative as well. But you get to be inquisitive, like I mentioned earlier today, be the inquirer into everything going on to make sure you really understand it before you address your problem.
All right, Bennett, really appreciate it. Can you share with all of our listeners the different ways that they can connect with you, follow you on your journey?
Okay, you can always reach me at my email address, which bfitch@noria.com. But I'm on LinkedIn quite a bit, so find us on there, noria.com. Noria has a LinkedIn page. Reliable Plant is our conference, so once a year at least, come to our event and we'll see you face to face. We're here right now. Probably too late for those listening, but Orlando next year. But always find out what events are happening at noria.com. But LinkedIn is probably the easiest way to more immediately find me. I like people who are leaving comments on posts I make and following me and using the notification reminder when I post something so we can continue to connect.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Bennett. Really appreciate it. Thank you to all of our guests who are here live with us.
Thank you, Ryan.
And also listening to us at a later point in time. Really appreciate you all for tuning into today's episode of the Maintenance Mavericks podcast. Again, my name is Ryan. I'm the CEO and founder of Upkeep. And, I'm also very, very active, as is Bennett, on LinkedIn. You can also shoot me an email at ryan@upkeep.com. I hope everyone enjoyed today's episode, and I look forward to connecting with everyone soon. Until next time. Thanks,
Thank you so much, Ryan.